Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a Soka researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy the conversation.
Hi everyone, my name is Maryke Luijendijk. I am South African/Dutch, and I currently live in Dubai in the UAE. I've been in education all my life. I love education, really love the future it creates, and I'm very, very happy to be here and to speak to Scott today.
Hi, Maryke. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. And I'm so excited to learn more about your educator journey and for you to share more about where this love for education came from and how you've cultivated that over the many years of work that you've done with navigating different educational spaces, institutions, and also just thinking about what's to come for education. We're living in very turbulent times. Across the board, where people are questioning what an education is even for, and how AI and all that is kind of influencing that and affecting it. And so I would love to learn a little bit more and get some pearls of wisdom from your experiences. And so thank you so much. And this is also another great opportunity to reconnect with a friend from the Harvard cohort. We just graduated this past May. Congratulations, Maryke. Congratulations to
And
everyone.
you?
Yes, me too. And and this is also kind of like a wonderful point to think, wow, well, what happens after Harvard? And how is that going to kind of inform the way that you move forward in your current role and in future roles? But, in order to understand all that's happening right now and what's to come, it also kind of requires us to think back on what led us to this point. And I think this is a great opportunity for you to share some of the milestones in your own background when it came to like what decision led to this opportunity, led to where you are here and why. So if you could share a little bit more about your journey with us, that would be wonderful.
Great. I'll try to summarize the last, I don't know how many years into a short answer. So for me, as I said, I've always been in education. I really love education and love what I do. It sort of happened by coincidence. I was studying in my native South Africa at the Potchefstroom University, it was called at that time. And I actually wanted to attend a conference, the World Conference on Sustainability. And I went to the director of communications and asked him if he could sponsor me. It was in my final year of studies. I did a bachelor in economics and journalism, and then you do what I think is called sort of your major in the US. With us, it's your fourth year. I did that in industrial psychology. And then went to the director of communications, said, I want to go to this conference. And while I was in his office, I heard that he's interviewing for a comms person at the university. And I was like, hey, pick me. I'm looking currently. So long story short, we then managed to connect, and I was then employed by the then Potchefstroom University in the corporate communications department. There I was for about 4 or 5 years, and really very early on in my career, I had an amazing project where after 94, post-apartheid, the Minister of Education declared that Potchefstroom University, a historically white university, had to merge with Mafeking University, historically black university. And then I was part of the whole merger process. The new corporate identity, all of a sudden, all the comms had to go into 3 different languages compared to only one before. And just to really see at grassroots levels, it sounds quite idealistic, but really to see how education really brought people together. There was a lot of resistance, a lot of infighting about who does what. But the moment people started doing research together or started discussing curriculum design together, it was just amazing to see how people came together. And then ultimately, I was in the corporate communications head office of this newly merged institution. I then realized to pay off the study debt, because unfortunately still to this day, education is not free in South Africa. I realized to pay off the study debt for my education, the rand currency will not get me there. So then I went to the UK on a 2-year working visa where I did something completely outside of my line. I worked in hotels, literally scrubbing toilets in some instances to earn in pounds to be able to pay off the study debt, but learned so much about people. It was just amazing. The sort of eclectic mix of people that was there. It was really a melting pot of people from all over the world. So I was there for about 2 years and then decided the hotel industry is not something I want to stay in indefinitely, even though I really enjoyed working there. And I actually thought I'll go back to South Africa. I had some opportunities there. And then one of my very good friends that I met at university reached out and said, hey, I'm at Rotterdam School of Management, Erasmus University in the Netherlands. Here's a role. It seems to be quite a good fit for you. Why don't you send on your profile? So long story short, few months later, I went to the Netherlands, had never even been to Rotterdam, and then joined RSM as an admissions manager. Thought I will be there for about a year or so. 10 years later, I was then heading up the MBA portfolio, marketing, admissions, recruitment. And then in the final year of that, did quite a lot around internationalization, setting up new programs, joint programs, etc. Then life, personal, family brought me to Dubai, to the UAE. That was about 8 years ago, and I've had the privilege to have amazing roles in the UAE. My first role was to set up an executive MBA for the American University in Dubai, which was set up in association with Cornell University. And that was really amazing, from curriculum design to recruiting faculty, recruiting staff, to actually building a building. That's very Dubai. We were looking for space, looking at options, and decided, oh, let's just build a building. So that was amazing. We, after 2 years, had a beautiful EMBA building, executive MBA building. And then once that was up and running, we really only needed an academic director to sort of be the steward of this program. And from the start, I mentioned that after this program is set up and running, I'll be leaving because I don't see myself purely as only an academic director. Then, without it really being planned, I went freelance because people heard that I'm available and had so many people asking me for projects, did amazing things, did a very nice project for a startup in EdTech. Did a great project with GMAC, the Graduate Management Admissions Council, where I actually interviewed deans of the top 20 European business schools and wrote a report on the future of graduate management education. And I also did a strategy project for the DIFC, it's Dubai International Financial Center. It's sort of the Canary Wharf or the Wall Street of the Middle East. I did a project for their academy, and then they lured me to the other side and asked me if I wanted to join them full time. So then I was with them for about 3-4 years, and the DIFC Academy is really a nice sort of blend between traditional formal education and in-company corporate training and everything in between. So the Academy houses the executive MBA programs of London Business School, Georgetown, ESCP, these type of institutions, but we also offered a lot of corporate trainings for the community. There are about 6,000 companies in the DIFC, and had a lot of partnerships with institutions like the CFA Institute, ACCA, CIMA, the acronyms go on. And that was really great. Also in terms of supporting actually Georgetown to set up shop in Dubai, and supported them with the whole process, etc. Which brings me to where I now am. I was contacted by a Chinese business school that is looking to set up shop in Dubai. So currently we are busy with that whole process where we've had to do the curriculum design, get approvals from all the authorities, Knowledge and Human Development Authority, the CAA, which is the Commission for Academic Accreditation, etc. Just ensuring that we have venues, basically anything and everything starting from scratch, setting that up in Dubai. And it's been great with the UAE is such a dynamic and very entrepreneurial type of nation. So they're very open also to attract educational institutions. It's actually part of the D33, it's called the Dubai Long-Term Vision and Strategy for the region. So it's just been great to be a part of that. And with all of this, I sort of feel I've come full circle because now I've worked in education in Africa, in Europe, in the Middle East. I studied in the US after Harvard. So I actually have only one continent left, which is Oceania, to do something with education. Then I feel like I've come full circle, because also now Asia with a Chinese business school. So let's see when I can tap into that continent. So that's me.
Wow, that's amazing. And just how you like were able to travel and work in and collaborate with people from truly all around the world. It's just, you know, you're just the epitome of a global citizen in terms of how you interact with those peoples, because it's not always, you know, like the romanticized ideal. We're all working together and everything's harmonious. You mentioned about from your, you know, like earlier days in undergrad, having graduated, and then looking at this merger process between you know, these two universities. That sounds like that was kind of like the initial like starting point for you to really become quite enamored with the psychology of how people interact, and then the kind of wider like systems thinking of the management piece that is so important for progress to actually like, you know, be solidified and to like advance forward in the project. So it's I feel like, you know, from one thing after the other, it's just building upon itself to get to where you are now, where people are coming to you as the authority on how to figure out building up a school, a university, right? And in the case with China, it seems like, I mean, it seems kind of almost like overwhelming when I think of it just from my own vantage point of like, where do you start when you have a blank, you know, like it's like you're starting from
Mm-hmm.
scratch, and this is the blank slate that they're saying, hey, we need this to happen. And so I imagine you also work with a larger team, but the management piece of it, I think, is really, really fascinating, and something that's been like a through line throughout your career. But I'm kind of wanting to like backtrack a little bit more, if that's
Mm-hmm.
okay, because you started off just saying that you love education, right? That's kind of like the bigger picture for you, and then you began with your undergrad experience. I'm wondering if there was anything before undergrad in terms of like really important influences that allowed you to like, and then maybe like planting the seed of that love for education. Like, what is it, like when you boil it down, what is education all about for you,
Mm-hmm.
and how is that like kind of, you know, planted when you were in your early years?
Yeah, and I think it's only now, if I reflect on it, that I think, oh, this must have had an influence. It was, sort of not a conscious choice to go into education. As I said, I sort of stumbled into it. I studied economics, journalism, industrial psychology, so not pure education. Um, but then when I started working in it, I'm like, oh, this is me, this is my place. But I mean, I'm surrounded by teachers. My mother was a teacher, my father was a teacher. My sister is a teacher. My sister-in-law is a teacher. There's just a family of teachers in our sort of vicinity, in my vicinity. One thing really, I actually wrote that in my Harvard essay as well, is my father. We were first in Cape Town, and then he was appointed as headmaster to a school in a very rural town called Laingsburg in South Africa. Farming community, sort of a struggling school in that they didn't make the numbers, and we moved there when I was about 6. And then I really sort of saw the impact education can have. He said, it's only afterwards that I realized, gosh, they actually did really interesting things. I mean, I was just there at school. But they, for instance, had a bus that used to bring children from Cape Town that had some challenges in the big sort of school setup. They brought them to Laingsburg. They stayed in the hostel and then took them home over weekends, etc. And just to see the change in these kids and to see what really personal attention does to children. I mean, we were from your first year until you leave school. There were only like 120 pupils. I only had like 7 kids in my class. But also that to see the personal attention, to see the care they took. And it's, as I say, it's only afterwards now that I realize also for me, for instance, they were so good at meeting people where they were, in that they did special things maybe for me and a friend that were maybe a little more further in one subject as opposed to others. And I didn't see it as that at the time, but afterwards I realized, gosh, that was one example really of where I saw the impact it can have. And then something else, which is actually a very nice story to me anyway. My father's aunt, we call her Tanette, she was born blind. And actually, you wouldn't know it unless she told you, in a sense, in that she traveled the world. She was in the Braille Commission of South Africa post 94. She was in charge of translating Braille into all the African languages. She taught at the School for the Blind in Worcester. And with her, again, it was just amazing to see how education, despite some of the challenges and maybe disadvantages that some of her challenges brought, that education can help you overcome that. And where the story is full circle, when she passed away, her inheritance, my father already passed away, so it went to my siblings and me, divided amongst the siblings, and the amount almost to the cent covered my Harvard degree. So I was like, oh, this is amazing, right? It's just such a full circle education moment. So I think a lot of those things, just those examples I had, without realizing it, planted the seed that made me sort of see, oh, there's something here, right? It does make a difference. And just for me personally, I would never have been able to move abroad to have the roles that I had unless I had the opportunity to go to university, and I had a lot of scholarships. I had to self-fund everything. And as I said, I went abroad to pay off the debt, but I still had opportunities to go. And that made a huge difference, which my life might have looked differently if I didn't have those.
Thank you so much, Maryke, for sharing more about this family of educators that you come from, because it makes a lot of sense, honestly. And what an opportunity, not only for your father who went to this rural school as a headmaster, but also for yourself to have studied at that school. But as I think we're very much aware, like especially at those young ages, you're like a sponge, right? You're just absorbing
Mm,
everything, and you're observant of what's happening around you, because learning, I think, is such an ingrained, uh, you know, I don't know, identity. Is it an identity? I don't know. It's an active process by which we need to survive, and so for you to like really understand that the personal care and attention that these teachers were giving you was really like the nutrients for you to thrive, and that it would also kind of culminate later in your years as this feeling of deep appreciation, this appreciation of like what others will do for you. You talked a lot about how they were able to like meet you where you're at. And I think that that is so powerful. It's so important for young people to feel heard, right? And so this is something that I'm really happy that you were able to share that about your experience. I wanted to also like talk a little bit about this experience of yours at university, because it sounds like when you graduated, you found yourself at a very pivotal moment in the history of South Africa, with apartheid. And so, one like question is, how old were you at that moment in apartheid history of
mhm.
1994? And then also, could you maybe speak a little bit more about that merger process? Because I feel like that was a very rich experience that informs a lot of the work that you do in terms of management, especially in higher ed spaces.
Exactly. And now giving away my age, I was 14 with the end of apartheid, or with the 94 elections, and then finished my undergrad, or started working at the university in 2001. And that was when this whole merger process was declared. And actually, just adding to the university, I also had the opportunity to do my master's part time while I was working at the university, which was amended, was funded by the university. So again, this sort of stream of opportunities that came my way, that just enabled me to study further, was really amazing. And it's only afterwards, actually a few years later, that I realized how amazing it was to have a project like that in your first job, right? And I think then I really saw how there are always two pieces to any of these type of processes. One is the sort of policy management piece, and one is the people piece. And I think sometimes we miss the people piece, and we think, oh, the policy or the management, these are the structures, this has to happen and it will happen, but really to see how you had to physically bring people together, right? It was only when there was so much resistance, for instance, between faculty, but it was only when we literally put them next to each other in an office that they started speaking to each other. Or with students, it was only when we took Potchefstroom students and drove all the way to Mafikeng, which is about 3 hours away, and they did a joint sports event, or they did a joint project or presentation, whatever the case may be, it's only then that they started realizing, gosh, but actually there's a common goal here. And the other thing, it's always just the fear of the unknown, right? This was top down. There was no way we could say, no, it's not going to happen. So everyone sort of had to do it, but it was nobody's idea. So the buy-in obviously was very low. But then the moment when they saw, actually, there's something here, oh, we can learn a lot from these people. And also just the dialogue. I think we were never shy in South Africa as a whole, but also in this whole process. We were never shy to say, I don't like this, I don't like what you're doing, and then we speak about it. And I think that's so important. I think especially nowadays, nothing wrong with being politically correct, but I think sometimes we're not willing to put ourselves out there to actually have the disagreement. Might sound strong, but to actually just have the conversation about differences. And that's really the beauty of where it happens, right? That's where you realize, actually, we thought we were very different, but in the case of the university merger, this sort of common goal, gets us there. And of course, processes, procedures in terms of the new brand, the different languages we were in, that was amazing to do and to go through. But really, for me, to this day, it was just so profound. The anecdotes that I have of people that really were not happy in having to work together on this project. And in the end, you see, oh, they're walking on their own accord to go and have a coffee or a beer together, right? And nobody told them they should. So that was really amazing. And you are right. I think that had a big impact on me in terms of how education can bring people together, but also in terms of how you have to seek out the differences and name them and discuss them. And I've been privileged throughout with traveling, especially the job at RSM when I was recruiting students, that I saw so many different places in the world. I was so privileged to have to travel for my job. And again, you're always a little sort of afraid of a new place. You're like, oh, I'm not so sure. And the moment you start speaking to people, or the moment you work together, or you're at a recruitment event together, you're like, oh, these are amazing people, similar to us in our Harvard class. You're like, oh, they actually, we have some common goals. There are some commonalities, and we can discuss our differences. And that's how you also get friends for life. So yeah, it was indeed a great project, and amazing to be part of that, sort of my first year into my first job. And I still have contact with a lot of colleagues that were also involved in that process. So that's great. It's, it wasn't easy, obviously, but it also set a very solid foundation for very solid relationships.
Yeah, and you were making history, whether you knew it or not. You were in that moment building bridges together with your colleagues and doing something that had not never been done before in South African history. So I think that is something to say about a first job right out of college, or still during
Exactly.
college, really. And I love what you were sharing about how this work required them to be brought together physically, right? Holding space, seeing each other, understanding that it is not some idea or some concept or some abstraction of a person that is there before me, right? This notion of, oh, like, traditionally all black university and all white university, and oh, we can't possibly do this. But then, next thing you know it, they're getting beers and at the
Exactly.
bar, and then they're doing the work, right? And they have the common goal, like you said. And I think that is a really important component of global citizenship that maybe you might agree as well. But before we go a little bit further into that, I'm just curious because you had that experience at the start of your career, and then you moved on, and you had so many other rich experiences and found yourself traveling around the world. And you said that just now that you still have, you still keep in contact with a lot of the colleagues that were there. How is the university doing now? Because it's one thing to like engage in that pioneering work. It's another thing to maintain that work and build upon it. So
It's
yeah,
amazing.
any quick updates?
Yeah, I'm obviously very biased, and I cannot give an objective opinion because I graduated from there. I worked there. I'm still in contact with the former president, and I love him. But doing really, really well. And academically, student numbers wise, but what's really nice to see is also, on LinkedIn, when I see some of the feeds, it really represents the South African population, right? You can imagine, even when I left 3 years after this project, we still had to consciously think about, oh, is this representative? Do we have all stakeholders? Even this picture that we're taking, do we have somebody from all the campuses in it? Are we communicating in every language so everyone can access this, whatever, memo or this newsletter? Whereas now when I see the graduation photos, it's such a reflection of what you just see on the street in South Africa, all shapes, sizes, colors, backgrounds, ethnicities. Well, South Africa is the ethnicity, but you know what I mean? It's such an eclectic mix of students. And that's just really great to see that it's very unforced. Which means it's really working, right? It means it's not a conscious choice now to be representative. It's just a way of living for the university. And that's actually amazing to see. It's only now when you ask the question that I realized, that is actually the way it is. So it's really nice. And actually one person I worked with still works there, and she also says she's still very happy, and it's going really well. So it's great that it worked out that way, and that it's now one university with 3 different campuses and not like different campuses that had to become a university.
I'm so happy that you've maintained this strong connection with your university and that you have so much pride in the work that has been done and continues to be done. Because at the end of the day, universities exist for people, right?
Mm-hmm.
For future generations,
Mm-hmm.
and to see that the difficult work of like acknowledging the differences and like envisioning what would be the ideal of like really kind of making sure that everyone felt a sense of belonging, a sense that this was their university, that they could feel at ease, and that they could like really strive and reach their full potential. All of that was put in play through the policy piece that you talked about, but then the people piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think grappling at a time when that was so raw, right? And kind of like
Mm-hmm.
what was playing out, what was the history of South Africa before that, just really difficult emotions coming through. But yes, so you played this very pivotal role in the beginning of it, and you've maintained that friendship over the years. It does sound though like from moving forward into like your other career pivots and journeys, that you find yourself at the like the starting point more often than at the kind of like maintaining of an
Mm-hmm.
institution point. Am I correct in identifying
Don't,
that there's a
don't
certain like excitement of doing
Don't
that?
say it out loud. Then any future employers will be like, "Oh, she's going to leave after a while." No, but you're sure. You're right. It's really exciting to set things up. And as I said, like I alluded to with my role at American University Dubai at AUD, the moment it was up and running, I also just don't think sort of the bracket of who I am and my skills and expertise would have been best suited for that. Because indeed, then it's more the maintenance, ensuring that it runs properly, which there's always a part of that in any role. But you are right. It is great, new things, different places, different people. That's also the move to the UAE. We were like, oh, what are we doing? Where are we going? We've only ever really been for work, and we weren't even so sure, but we said, oh, let's just take the plunge. So it is really nice, that sort of unexpected. And being able to, this might sound really airy-fairy, but really being able to build something, right, physically in the case of the
Hmm.
Dubai program, but also to just set something up to con to really bring people together that have the best skills, and just see how things that you've done in previous roles actually are now coming together in a new role without you realizing it, right? While you were busy with it, for instance, at the DIFC, there's a huge new development, and I pitched for a big DIFC academy to also be built there. Anyway, different scale, more universities to be attracted. And now in this role that I'm in right now, a big part of what I'm doing is actually sourcing all of these venues, and all of a sudden I have all these boulders speak and square feet and whatever else that I never knew about. And while I was busy with it in a previous role, I didn't even realize I'm going to use it ever again. So that's just one example of where it's really great how does all come together. And I think it doesn't have to be different roles necessarily, but I suppose we all have that a little bit, right? It's about keeping it fresh, and also keeping yourself fresh, right? I think the moment you're like, oh, I've got this, it might start showing in what you're doing, right? It's good to sometimes feel a little, "Oh, do I really have what it takes?" Or Google is your friend, and you're like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. Don't tell them, but I'm going to figure it out. And I think this sort of startup type of roles or entrepreneurial type of roles has a lot of that. But you have still the sort of rigor and substance of academia, right? So it's sort of that blend between business and academia. And I think that's also why I love graduate management education, which has been the majority of my career, where we always say, and here I'm going to offend quite a few people maybe, but the best faculty member is not necessarily the best dean, right? Is not necessarily the best manager. And that's something that I think in the business school world that we get and that we realize more and more, right? That you do need to run like a business. There is a lot of processes that needs to be in place, but you still need to secure the academic rigor and the stalwart faculty to be involved, and then sort of blending that. And there will always be a little bit of tension between we need to go out there and conquer the world as a business, but also, oh, we need to ensure that everything is in place, that we have the substance. And a lot of that is indeed in these sort of roles, in supporting people setting up, in management education. So yeah, it's been great. And now that you mention it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. I like this sort of wheeling and dealing in a good way, but setting up and bringing people together.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that you're like a builder, right? You derive this sense of like, like pooling together all of your skills and then some, right? Because there's going to be inevitably areas that you don't know because each school is going to be located in a unique context with new people coming in, new stakeholders who, of course, have many opinions and probably want you to do it a certain way. But you have that spirit within you and that experience to back it up of knowing how to bring people together and what to focus your attention on so that you can adjust the dials, right? Pull the different levers and that complex control panel that's before you that you're making at the same time, so that you can have it start to build momentum and get off to the right start, right? Because how you start is often how you finish as well, right?
Oh,
You want to
absolutely.
make sure that it's really set up well, because that's going to be informing the way that it will continue to like progress moving forward. So a lot of responsibility, yes, and not to say that those who start it, it's more important than those who maintain it. I mean, I don't even know if you can say one is more important than the other. You need both, undoubtedly. But it's just really cool that, like you're saying, like, nothing is wasted in your past experiences, and how you're able to then apply that to these new contexts, and you're building trust through these buildings and these programs, and you're able to point back to them and say, yeah, that I helped with that, or I'm the one that led that charge, and now let's envision what we can do for you. And I think that's just that makes for very exciting work, and that learning process is uniquely yours. So like what a great kind of journey that you've been on. And I feel like in a past lifetime maybe you were like an engineer or something,
Oh, no,
constructing
not at all.
buildings, but now you're just doing within the education space.
I'm engineering education. I'm going to put that on my profile.
Exactly. It sounds catchy. Everyone's gonna be signing up for your freelancing services. But like when you talk about the like with all the experience that you had, like you very humbly acknowledge that you don't know everything, and that sometimes, right, it requires a new skill set to be acquired, maybe a new kind of consideration. And so I'm curious, it doesn't have to be necessarily with the current project that you're working on with this Chinese school that's trying to set up shop in Dubai, like you said. Maybe it's the previous one, but could you maybe speak to a moment when you really had to adapt and like, learn a new, I don't know, something new that was maybe exciting, but also scary at the same time, because, there's such expectations and pressure, I would imagine, in putting something on like this. So how do you navigate that space where you very clearly have to step into the learning role, and then you have to kind of be able to apply that immediately with a certain level of confidence and assurance that overall picture project, everything is moving in the right direction.
I think there are a few things there, right? I think one part of it is definitely making it up as you go along, right? With taking calculated risks, but knowing that, okay, what do I have the capacity for right now, and what do I still need to learn? Another key piece is people, right? Depending on the type of institution you're in, but at the DIFC, for instance, I was super privileged that there were other staff members and they were team members. So you don't need to know it all, right? I think the sort of art in a sense is knowing who to involve where, right? But that's another thing, also surrounding yourself with people that just know so much more than you. I remember a former manager once told me, always employ people that are better and more clever than you are, and that's such a good lesson, right? Make sure that the people around you can support in that. And then indeed sometimes it's the hard skills. I must say actually Harvard was a part of that, where I realized in a sense, I wanted the academic grounding to know what I've been making up as I went along, right? I've been in education my whole career, and I've never been educated in education. So that was part of it. And then also just the technical skills, for instance, at the DIFC, I don't have a financial background at all. So I very quickly had to do 50%, if not even more, of the courses that we actually offer, so I can at least know what I speak about. And there again, it's great how people are always so eager and helpful and very gracious and generous in sharing their knowledge, right? With the CFA Institute, for instance, I could just reach out to our regional manager or key contact there and say, hey, can I do this course? Can I try it out? I don't want to be a CFA certified person, but I want to know what this is about. And so I think it's a combination of actively looking at, yes, I need these skills, of just making it up as you go along, and ensuring that, yes, of course, the basics need to be there, but not afraid to like just make the mistakes and learn from it. And then also just having the people around you that can support you. And I think the other thing is, maybe I'm just getting old. Like, it's also just not pretending that you know stuff that you don't, right? It's really just sort of at the core of it, I'm sure all of us, if you know you're solid in what you're doing, then it's so much easier to say I don't know, or to just say I'm sorry, that was a mistake, how can I fix it, or to say I need more resources, I need more support. Maybe earlier on in careers, we're much more about saving face and, oh, they shouldn't know what I'm doing, they shouldn't know that I don't know what I'm doing. But I think that's a big part of it as well, to just own what you already have, and then see, okay, here I have gaps, and this is what I need to do to sort of fill those.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much. And that makes a lot of sense. And again, it resonates with everything that you've been sharing about the people piece and how important that is to value other people, especially when they're more clever than you and you have a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is about like that seeking spirit of like finding the right people, learning from them. And I think also on your end, you said about like owning what you already have and like what you
Mm-hmm.
know, but then recognizing that there's always going to be gaps. There's always going to be these areas that you have to kind of venture into, seemingly like with like smoke and fog and everything, but you can always get there with other people, and I think that is, yeah, crucial when it comes to like building out larger organizations like these kinds of graduate schools and their programs, because you're not going to get there from one individual just kind of pulling everyone forward. It's really
Mm-hmm.
that collective, like everyone is taking a step forward together. And that is super important. And I feel so, again, like all this discussion about, you learning from others, being bold, creating new things with people, the right people, and then also just like going across borders, right? Like from one country to another. Again, this all just kind of speaks, I think, to this notion of like being a global citizen means. Not just the fact that you are crossing national lines and talking with people who are different, but it's that you're truly learning from people who are different and you have a common goal, like you said. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts, maybe building on top of that pre-existing kind of foundation that you've provided to us. But like, when you think of global citizenship, like what do we really mean here? Or what do you mean in this case as being a global
Mm-hmm.
citizen?
I think I was also really privileged to grow up in South Africa where, I mean, we have 12 official languages, right? So from when you open your eyes, really, as a baby, you're surrounded by people that look different to you, that has a different language, and you need to adapt to that regardless of where you live in the country, right? So I think that already created an awareness without me realizing it. It's only when I moved away to a society where you can sort of spot the nationality anywhere by the way they look, the way they act, the way they speak, etc., much more sort of outspokenly from this nationality. Whereas in South Africa, I mean, define a South African, it's almost impossible. So that's really made me aware of, cultural differences, bridging cultures, etc. And for me, again, sort of going back to, I don't know if you know the South African saying, it's called Ubuntu, which sort of means I am through you, in a sense. It's not the right way to explain it, but that's part of it as well. This realization that it sounds so cliche, but we really are not alone in this world, right? There really is more than just your neighborhood or just your household. And that throughout my career has just been amazing to experience both sides, where it's like we have these huge differences, but as I've said so many times, there are commonalities, right? I'm so naively, optimistically believing that we'll always find common grounds, right? We don't have to agree, but we can have a conversation, and there will be something there, right? Or we can just agree to disagree, and we leave it at that. But there's always scope for conversation. And to me, that's very much what global citizenship is. I think it's useful and a privilege nowadays that you don't need to physically go somewhere to have access to people from all over the world. That's very different from probably when you grew up as well, where you probably had to write a letter and post it overseas if you wanted to interact with somebody. So my first trip abroad was amazing. I actually went on exchange to Tübingen University, again in Germany, again an amazing privilege opportunity to be able to experience a different culture and different education. But that was the first time, my first trip overseas, and I met people physically, and that was really my first real interaction. I think what's great now is that we do have access to more if we handle it responsibly, of course. But I think it's that awareness. It's knowing that you're part of a bigger whole, but then sort of counterintuitively, that also really teaches you to know who you are within that, right? I think it's only, for me at least, it's only when I moved abroad that I realized, oh, who am I? Or started thinking about who am I really? What does it mean to be from where I am, born where I am, traveled where I've been traveling? And I see that in my own children as well now that grow up in Dubai, where they're like 35 different nationalities in a class of 35 almost, right? Like it's such a mix of people. And also just for them, they're still small, but the conversations they have around identity, where they South Africans last touch, but they also UAEans or Dubaians, whatever we call that. And it's so rich and interesting, those conversations. And just such a privilege again for them to, we celebrate Diwali and we celebrate Christmas and we celebrate Ramadan and we celebrate Eid and everything in between. So it's that. I think it's the connection, the discussion, but it starts with contact, right? It starts with just realizing that, there are people different to me. And that's where taking it back to South Africa, you just walk out the door and there are people different to you. So it's really an amazing country to have grown up in, to realize these. And then what we've been discussing, then also sort of seeing the change when a lot of the historical challenges we had were addressed, and the processes we had to do to address that, and still addressing and still building the country to alleviate some of the inequalities, etc. So it's just been really interesting to be a part of that and to sort of still be a part of that by, association of being South African. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Maryke. And what an interesting, I found it so interesting that what you shared in being from South Africa, you were already in this environment of such great diversity, not just in terms of linguistic diversity, culturally as well, and that was the kind of like norm, right? That was you were like, oh, of course, this is it, and then you went to another country like Germany, and then you saw this kind of like stark contrast. Maybe it was more like you just saw a bunch of, Germans, and then that was shocking for you to being like, whoa. I would say for myself, it's probably the opposite. It was like I saw more of like, kind of like similar kind of grouping
Mm-hmm.
here in like Southern California. And then I went to another culture. First time abroad for me was in Argentina. And it wasn't like, oh, they look so different. I mean, I think maybe they were a little bit better dressed because, Buenos Aires, they're very stylish. But it was just like there's so much that like you pick up on that it's just different. And I think the question then becomes like, how do you sit with that difference, that feeling of being uncomfortable, of reconciling between one reality and another, because your reality in South Africa you grew up with, that was like safe, that was what you were comfortable with, and then suddenly now you have something that it's not quite, you didn't give off the sense of it was threatening, but it was, curious. It was, wow, what is this? And so some people might find it the other way, right? Where it's like, oh no, I have to choose one or the other. When in reality, it's like, well, why not both? Why not
Mm.
bring them together into you? And I think that kind of brings up the Ubuntu that you talked about. I am through you. It's like this channeling of like how you take in something, how that inevitably shifts something within yourself, and that you don't hold on to it forever. You let it go as well, right? It's not like you were born in South Africa and so you must stay in South Africa forever. Right? It's our lives take us so many
Mm-hmm.
different twists and turns. But that I think finding of common ground that you talked about, right? Having this, I don't know if you use the word unbridled, but this this sense of like optimism, right? That like, yes, like we will eventually get there. We both have to work towards it. I think that is the kind of like attitude that many people who have had the privilege of studying in different parts of the world realize such value in those interactions. And again, in that uncomfortable feeling of, I don't know what to make of this situation. I don't know. And you know what? That's okay, because hey, that person probably doesn't know either. Who really knows? It's this, we're constantly forming these new
Exactly.
um, versions of ourselves, right? So I
And
think that
I'm
embracing that, yeah. Hmm.
And sort of, yeah, and to that point, I'm a big believer of just naming it. And maybe that's my time in the Netherlands that made me so direct, but I'm absolutely, if just naming it, right? Just to say, oh, I am not sure about this, or I feel uncomfortable with this, or why are you doing things this way, right? I feel like the moment you've at least named it, then you can start working with it, right? And then you can see, is it an issue? Is it a non issue? Do we need to work through it? Whatever the case may be. But I think, and that's again what I say, I get a sense sometimes, I sound as if I want to save the world, but I do get a sense nowadays that we don't name we sort of afraid to name things because it's really putting yourself out there, or you might seem vulnerable, or you might seem offensive. And my mother always used to say, it's not if you do it, it's how you do it, right? So I absolutely believe if you just name it in a respectful way, and in a way to say that I want to learn about this. I'm not calling this out, but I want to figure out, why are you reacting this way, or why are you behaving this way, or why am I feeling this way when I'm here? That's so much, a lot of the issue already is resolved just by naming it, because then it's out there and you can, if it's being misunderstood, that can be addressed. If it's something you're doing that needs to be changed, then that can be done, whatever the case may be. And yeah, it's just amazing the sort of difference it can make if it's just out there, if you're just open and transparent and you just say it like it is.
What a revolutionary thing you're saying in the current political times
I
that
know.
we're living
Like,
through. It's,
mm-mm,
it's gonna, yeah. Well, I agree with you though, and what I gather from what you just said, is that it takes a lot of courage to then name it, because you ultimately have to be genuine and honest with yourself as far as where are you
mm,
at, and you put that out there. The other person may not be willing to do it
mm-hmm,
first, but you do it first, and then that person, it's like the ball is in their court. How are they going to respond to that? And actually, you probably come to find that they, and also another thing that you said too, it's not, maybe this was your mother who said this quote, but like, it's not if you do it, it's how you do it. Oh
mm-hmm,
my gosh, yeah, the how part of
mm,
it is so crucial, because again, that's where you can really give like full play to your real feelings and emotions about it, and your intention as well. Your intention,
mm-hmm.
shouldn't be to try to like, the whole fake it till you make it, just try to like get around them sneakily. But it's just like, hey, what's our common goal? If we're truly aligned and working towards that, let's get real and let's move forward with this. And so I would imagine working with people from all around the world, there's such complexity in terms of like how are they coming into this space and what are we truly aligned in our goals? But I think having an anchor in like where you're at, then becomes this reference point, right? Where people are feeling that much more safe, that like they can really step into the same space as you, and they can also take on that same feeling of like responsibility that like I also want to keep it real too and be honest, to be genuine, because we live in a world where there is duplicity in the things that we say and then what we actually do, and unfortunately that just kind of hampers a lot of progress. So, the times that we're living in, is just too critical to kind of waste effort in that sense. And I know that, for the work that you're doing, like you're able to make such progress in building out these new models because you've experienced a range of, different work environments as well as different peoples. But having that mindset, I feel like is a nice through line. And you know what? I'm going to name it for you, Maryke. I think you're a global citizen. I'm just going to name it.
Name it.
Okay.
Name it. Good.
I named it. It's out there. It's being recorded. We're done.
It's
Thank you.
official.
It's official. But thank you so much, Maryke. And I wanted to also give this. Well, I mean, I feel like there's so much about your experience that I still want to like unpack about like the different countries that you worked in, and maybe like what were the projects that gave you the most struggle, and like what is your biggest like worries about the future. But we don't have all the time to unpack everything, so we might have to have like a part two at some point. But I just really appreciate you sharing about your background and what brought you into the education space, the excitement of like building new models, and also I think this awareness of not only like the value we put on other people, but the differences that come about through interacting with those people, meeting them at the table, working with them, and having the courage from within ourselves to name what we're experiencing, to name what we're seeing, and to have conviction in like where should we kind of like put a stake in the ground and like move forward. So I feel like you have accomplished so much in your professional career, but then also just broadly speaking in your life with how you view these challenges and these differences. And I'm really excited to see how this work with the Chinese university goes. I'm sure it's going to be a resounding success, and then you'll find your way in Oceania at some point as well, to kind of complete the circle. But as we're kind of wrapping up this conversation, I did want to ask you about any book recommendations or movie recommendations, anything that you'd like to share with the listeners.
Yeah, so in terms of book recommendations, movie recommendations, I wouldn't want to pin it to one only, and that sort of is probably my final recommendation, where I absolutely are such an advocate of just go out there and explore, right? So I'm not giving a definitive answer, but just read that book that you think you're going to hate and see what it's all about, right? Or just watch that movie in a genre that you've never watched and speak to somebody about it. Because I think that's such a reflection of also what I just want us to do. And I think what education just does, right? It just exposes you to different ways of thinking, different opinions, different people that otherwise you wouldn't have. So for me, I try and do that. I'm not very good at it, especially if I'm like, oh, I just want a nice book. But every so often I try and stomach the whatever sci-fi movie, and I'm not into sci-fi at all, just to get a sense of what is this. And maybe it just confirms, yes, I'm never going to watch this again. Or maybe there's something, we also change, right? And I think that's part of it as well, the way you feel about whatever a global citizen is right now, or what education should do. It probably will, and it should change 5 years from now. So that's my very non-definitive answer: is read the book you don't want to read, watch the movie you think you're going to hate, and who knows, maybe you're surprised, just like education very often surprises us.
Well, I'm not surprised that you would say something like that, because you want us to be uncomfortable, Maryke. You're like, hey,
I'm
go
just
do
dodging
that.
the question.
Yes. No. That's. I mean, you did talk about how you really don't like sci-fi, and I can imagine, various different movies that you probably would be like, we'll see. I don't know how
Let's
this will
see.
go out. But thank you so much, Maryke. I think that's a wonderful recommendation for our listeners and also for myself too. And appreciate the time that you spent here on the podcast. I did want to pass it over to you for the last few words. Any final thoughts, considerations about global citizenship, or just about kind of what we've discussed so far? I'd like to have you have the last word.
I probably, from this conversation, I think the one key takeaway for us, for me included, is just name it. And then if I can pass on the legacy of my mother it's not if you do it, it's how you do it. I think if you just, any situation, any person, if you just go to them with the right attitude, it goes a long way into solving any issues that they might be or that might arise.